If I could summarize my life in 4 words, those words would be, I'll figure it out. Whenever I dropped out of college at 19 years old, I told myself that I'd figure it out. And I did. I realized that I could do YouTube. When I started a YouTube channel without knowing what kind of content I was going to make, or really knowing much of anything about the business of YouTube and how to actually make a living with it, I told myself I'd figure it out. A few years later, whenever I decided to move to a country that I had never previously visited to be with my once long-distance girlfriend, I told myself I'd figure it out. And I did. And now, a little over a year after making that move, I am living in another part of that country, that same country, the Netherlands, in a city that neither I nor my girlfriend, who is born and raised in the Netherlands, had previously been to. And we made this move under the pretense that we'd figure it out. And lo and behold, that's exactly what we're doing. Now, I say move. We're only going to be here for about a month. After that, we're going to the US for a few months. And after that, everything's up in the air. But I do know one thing. We'll figure it out. We're going to figure it out. But in the meantime, I want to be as present as possible in this different part of the Netherlands because, I mean, first of all, look at it. How can you not want to be present and just embrace your surroundings when you're surrounded by things like this? But at the same time, again, I don't know what's going to happen after those 3 months in the US. We might come back here, we might not. We don't necessarily know. And so I'm going to treat these next 30 days before we catch that flight going to Dallas as if they were the last 30 days that I'm going to be in the Netherlands, because truthfully, it's possible that they will be. That said, with me consciously deciding to be as present as possible in this new city here in Gelderland, I want to talk about some of the things that I've noticed that are different about Gelderland and Brabant. And of course, I'm going to be making sweeping generalizations. I've only been in Gelderland for a total of 3 days, I think. We got here on a Friday. It's Monday right now. So just a few days, and most of that time has been spent literally just getting things situated, getting all of the basic necessities and essentials as far as just living. But I digress. The first thing that I've noticed that's different about Gelderland compared to Noord Brabant, and I don't know if I'm actually saying these names correctly, but you know what I'm talking about. You know what places I'm talking about if you're Dutch. So the first thing that I've noticed is that people here in Gelderland don't really speak or understand English as well as they did in Brabant. Now, this might be in part because the specific area of Gelderland that we're in is very small. Okay, I thought that the town that I was staying in Brabant was small. I'm not going to say exactly what town it was, but it was in the Sprangkapelle, Waalwijk, Kaatsheuvel area. So in that general vicinity. I thought that area was small. This area is small. This area is very, very small. Usually, when I film videos outside like this, I feel this sense of social anxiety, but I don't feel that right now because there's literally nobody here. There's nobody here. It definitely feels a lot less dense, but I digress. People here don't seem to speak or understand English nearly as well, and if I wasn't the only American in that area that we just came from, in Brabant, I'm definitely the only American in this particular city that I'm in. Definitely the only American, because I can tell when I speak English to people that it almost takes them an extra second or two to process what I'm saying. Whereas in Brabant, they instantly made that switch in their minds. So they instantly knew, okay, he's speaking English. Here, you can almost see the gears turning in their head as they try to translate or try to process what it is that I'm saying. And then from there, when they respond in English, I notice that their English tends to be a lot more broken. And of course, their English is still leaps and bounds better than my Dutch. My Nederlands is niet zo goed. Niet zo goed at all. But that's definitely a big difference that I noticed pretty early on. Just going to the reception center at the Airbnb, or let's say, for example, going to a bike shop to rent bikes, things of that nature. Those little interactions that I'd have in those situations definitely are a little more difficult, I would say. There's more friction in those interactions simply because the language barrier is more pronounced. Now, the next thing that I've noticed, the next difference I've noticed between Gelderland and Noord Brabant is the prevalence of nature out here. The prevalence of nature. I mean, look at this. Now, that's not to say that there isn't nature in Brabant. There most certainly is. But this nature is different. This nature is very, very different. I can tell that Gelderland is a city, or not a city, but a province that is very nature oriented. And if I'm not mistaken, there is a pretty big and well-renowned national park here. I don't remember the name of it. You can comment it down below if you know what I'm talking about. I think it starts with a V, maybe. But I would like to make my way out there before we leave, because again, I don't know if we're going to be back. But you definitely get a different feel out here. I feel like in Brabant, the pace of living was relatively slow compared to what I was used to, but the pace of living out here is even slower. In a good way though. Not in a backwards way, but in such a way where out here you can tell that people are just living life, enjoying the scenery. And you can tell that to an even greater extent than Brabant, the values seem to be a bit different. And this isn't to say that Brabant is materialistic or superficial by any stretch of the imagination, because that is most certainly not the case. But I mean, when you have a situation where homes literally have dirt sidewalks in front of them, that lets me know, at least, that, let's say, for example, people don't care if their shoes get dirty, right? I'm the kind of person, you see I'm walking on the sidewalk, you're not going to see me walk on dirt this whole entire video, because I like to keep my shoes clean. But I get the sense that people here aren't really thinking about stuff like that. They're not thinking about material things as anything more than, well, material. They're just things that can be replaced. And I'm not gonna lie, I do believe that is a healthy mindset to have. And if I didn't just have one pair of shoes myself, that's something that I would like to adopt in my psyche as well. But I digress. This isn't about me. This is about Gelderland. That said, the next thing that I've noticed about Gelderland in comparison to Brabant is that there are fewer bike lanes here. Now again, I'm generalizing and I'm in a very small town, but there are definitely far fewer bike lanes. I think the expectation here is that you simply share the road with the cars, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I've grown accustomed to doing that because in Brabant there are many roads where there are only suggested bike lanes. If you're Dutch, then you probably know what I'm talking about, where you just have the little dotted line in the side of the road, but you're still on the road. Here, that seems to be more of the standard rather than the exception. And hold on real quick. I know I just said I'm not going to walk in the dirt, but you can see over there, we have a lot of horses. I don't know if you can really see that, but you have all of those different horses there. There's just so much nature out here. And it kind of takes a lot of the elements that I like about Brabant and amplifies them. Just as far as the peace of mind you get being in a place like this. But I digress. Bike lanes. There are definitely fewer bike lanes, at least in this particular town. In the bigger cities, there are definitely bike lanes, just like there are in the bigger cities in Brabant, Den Bosch, Tilburg, Breda. But I would say, by and large, life in this particular part of the Netherlands, in this particular city, is probably better if you have a car. Whereas I get the sense that back in Brabant, life is almost better without a car. You almost get the diminishing return of the road tax and the cost of maintenance, fuel prices, insurance prices, things of that nature, where you generally don't see an adequate return on your investment, in my opinion, from having a car in a place like that. Here, I definitely think it would be optimal to have a car, but it's still not necessary. Even in this little town that I'm in, this little town of less than 20,000 inhabitants, you don't need a car, which is still one of the most mind-blowing things to me, being from Texas, where in a city of 500,000, you still need a car. But if you see me looking off to the side, I'm just looking at these horses. There are so many horses out here. Must be some sort of horse breeding place or racetrack, I don't know. But maybe you can see some of the scenery over there through the trees as well. Just a lot of really, really nice nature out here, but definitely not as many bike lanes by any means. Now, the next thing that I've noticed about Gelderland in comparison to Brabant is that the demographic here tends to skew a bit older. And again, this could just be unique to the town that I'm in, but I would almost venture to say that 50% of people here seem like they're above the age of 55. I would say at least half of the people here seem like they're above the age of 55. I haven't seen too many people in this particular town who seem to be in my age range. It kind of reminds me of when I was living in Allen, Texas, which is this suburb of Dallas, really affluent area, but not very many young people, because it's the kind of place that young people are trying to get away from. Here, I think that maybe a lot of younger people are going to Apeldoorn or just larger cities like that. They're not really opting to stay in a place like this, and understandably so. This seems like more of a retirement type of place, a place where you go to settle down and just relax, kind of like those horses over there. Okay, Nadia, if you're watching this, we're gonna walk over here so you can see these horses. But definitely much more of a slow pace of life. I thought I saw something behind me. That was really weird. But definitely much more of a slow pace of life, which generally caters to the older demographic who is just tired and exhausted. Okay, I'm 24 and I'm exhausted, so I can only imagine being 64, probably just completely exhausted. But definitely an older demographic out here. Not saying that's better or worse, it's just more indicative of the kind of place that I'm in general. And again, I'm happy to be here. I think that this is a really great place to spend what could potentially be my final 30 days in the Netherlands. But I digress. The next thing that I've noticed about Gelderland in comparison to Brabant, and this right here is more based on my own personal experience, but I've noticed that the cost of living here seems to be lower. The Airbnb that we're staying in, and I don't know if by the time I posted this video, I've already posted the Airbnb tour, apartment tour video, but basically the Airbnb that we're staying in costed $1,300 for the whole month. And in my opinion, that's a really good deal, because in Brabant, that was the first place I looked. I wanted to stay as close as possible to that area, that Sprangkapelle, Waalwijk, Kaatsheuvel area. I looked at Airbnbs out there and there was nothing for $1,300. Maybe you could rent a singular bedroom, something like that, but there was definitely no way that we were gonna get our own Airbnb, our own dedicated place for $1,300 a month. Just wasn't going to happen. But here, and maybe we just got lucky, but here, that is exactly what we were able to do. 28 days, $1,300, out here in nature, in what seems like a safe area, close enough to a bigger city that we can still gain access to all of the conveniences that come with being in a bigger city. But definitely cheaper from what I can tell. But ironically, and this is something that I didn't even have listed out, I hope you can hear me well with all of these cars. Again, there aren't really any sidewalks to walk on out here. I don't even think I'm supposed to be walking here, but yeah, don't know where else I'd walk. But anyways, ironically, given the fact that it's cheaper, I wouldn't have expected this, but I've also noticed that here in Gelderland, and especially in Apeldoorn, it seems as if people are a little more ostentatious, a little more showy with their money. I noticed that the cars tend to be a lot nicer. The houses tend to be a little bit more extravagant. And of course, again, we're operating with a very limited reference point here. But, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel as if I've seen things here that I never really saw in Brabant. For example, on the bus ride coming here, I saw a Rolls-Royce Wraith and a Bentley Continental within about a 5-minute span of one another. And those are two cars that I literally did not see for the entirety of my time in Brabant. So that's 13 months that I was in Brabant. Never saw those cars out there. And of course, cars aren't necessarily the best indication of wealth, because some people do live above their means. I know this because I used to be one of them. But at a certain level, I mean, a Rolls Royce is a Rolls Royce. And again, I just never saw that in Brabant. So definitely a little more of an ostentatious vibe. But once again, I don't know if that's just because of the specific area that I'm in, or if that's just Gelderland as a whole. As far as I'm aware, geld means money in Dutch. So maybe it lives up to the name in that regard. But it's interesting because for how small of a country the Netherlands is, I wouldn't have thought that there would have been this big of a difference between the different provinces. And yet after just 3 days, here we are. I mean, it's definitely a different vibe, a different atmosphere, different people, different architecture. You see the different homes, different cars. Everything's different. Not as different as coming from Texas to the Netherlands, but definitely a much bigger difference than I would have expected being in such a small country.